So now on the show, I'm joined by Nicola Magrath from Andrew Isaac's Law here in Melton Mowbray. So came to see us a while back, just before Christmas. So welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. It's great to be here.
So we mentioned you visited us just before Christmas.
Yes.
We all hear it said, don't we? Christmas comes, Christmas goes. People spend too much time together, arguing over the TV and anything else that comes to mind. And by January, it's divorce, isn't it?
Unfortunately, yes, that can be the case. We do say that January time can be one of our busier months with divorce and finances, yes.
You say finances. I bet most of the arguments probably are over finances, aren't they?
Yes, usually finances or children as well, yeah.
Yeah, my mum and dad were the same years ago. Always on the finances. Never about the TV, but the finances were always a big argument in our house when I was a kid. I remember it well. Remember it very, very well indeed. So has it been a busy time?
It has. January has been a particularly busy time, yes, with people coming to make initial inquiries about, divorce, finances, children, even some wills as well. Yeah.
It must be really stressful for people, really. Is it in most cases? Yeah.
When people come to me, it's never in a good situation, is it? It's either a breakdown of a relationship or, arguments over money, children, so they're not always in the best state of mind when they come to see me. So I obviously try and speak to them, give them the advice that they need, and just make sure that they understand and they're happy with the advice provided, and they can go away with a clearer head, really.
Yeah, but it's a bit of a minefield at times, I'm sure, but with your guidance, I'm sure you'll get them through it. Just a quick one for you. Do many kind of, come to see you and then suddenly everything's okay and they're sort of getting it back together again before it reaches that stage? Does that happen? Happy endings?
Yep, sometimes that can happen. Sometimes people come obtain the advice and then decide actually they don't want to separate and get divorced and they want to give it another try. And, sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it's worth a try in those situations.
So yeah, it can be a stressful time, no doubt, and it's nice to know that sometimes things end happily. Now, your speciality, of course, is family law, isn't it?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Yes. So many different areas, isn't there, no doubt, but you do the family law. One or two questions have been submitted to us over the past few days, and one of the questions is a person who's asking the question who was left some money by a relative who died some years ago. In fact, the date is 2003, and she didn't receive this via the executors. However, additional £2,000 was left for another person who went abroad after the funeral and has not been traced since. There are some questions as to whether the person who died gave him the £2,000 in cash while he was still alive, and he was terminally ill and sorted things out, as some people probably do in the last days. And as there was a record of this amount paid to him by bank card, therefore this person would not be entitled to any more payment. What can you tell us about that one?
So I think as well, added to the question was about whether the solicitors paid it into court as well, and it doesn't look like the beneficiary came forward to claim it. So in this instance, what can happen is that an executor can keep this money, the £2,000, in reserve, and there is such a thing as a 12-year limitation period for any claim to be made for this. And this 12 years is for this beneficiary to come forward that could not be originally traced. So in this situation, I think the starting point would be to go back to the solicitors who dealt with the estate and this gift and just ascertain what the exact position is. And I think they were worried about being charged for fees as well. So usually solicitors do give you an estimate of fees, first of all, before starting any work. So that should be explained before any charges are made.
Another question, a couple are living together, unmarried, not in a civil partnership, and have done so for many years. The house they live in is owned outright by one of them. What happens if this person dies first? Can a legal agreement be put into place so that this person can continue to live there for the rest of their life, and family members of the house owner only inherit it when that person dies? What's the score there with that one? What happens there?
So if the legal owner of the property dies first and there isn't a will in place, the house will pass to the nearest blood relatives as part of the intestacy rules. So the worst case scenario in this position is that they could evict the surviving partner. The legal agreement referred to, this would be a will. If a will was drafted, correctly, it would give the survivor a right to reside in the property, and then ultimately it would pass to their family members when the surviving partner dies or enters full-time residential care. So in this situation, if you are in this sort of scenario, we'd strongly advise that you get some wills prepared and make sure that they're protected should one of the partners die. So specialist legal advice would be needed in this case.
Right. a will is something we all put off, don't we? I'll do it soon, I'll do it soon, I'll do it soon. Soon never comes in some cases, does it?
Yes, you'd be surprised. And, in some circumstances, they aren't too expensive to prepare.
Right, excellent. Another question is, our house is owned in joint names. If one of us has to go into a nursing home in the future, can we be forced to sell the house to pay the fees? That's another big situation people often find themselves in, isn't it?
Yes, this can be a very common question, really, and like you say, common situation. But if one of you was still living in the property at the time, then you wouldn't be forced to sell the house. They would need your consent to be able to sell the house. Again, though, if you are in this situation, we'd strongly recommend you obtain further legal advice just to see if you can be further protected in this circumstance.
Right, excellent, yeah. And another one here, I'm divorced and finances have been resolved. Do I need a consent order? What's that one about?
So yes, this is a really important question in relation to divorce and finances. So what some people, and a lot of people I think, believe is that once you get divorced and you between the two of you, a lot of the cases it can be amicable. You sort out the finances between you, you just split the assets and separate them, and then that's the end of it. Unfortunately, with regards to the finances, this isn't the case. If there's no legally binding court order in place, then either party can come back in the future and claim against their finances. So we always recommend that once an agreement's been reached, it's included in a consent order and approved by the court. So family law solicitors can draft this for you, and they usually complete a D81 form, which is also a snapshot of your finances. This gets sent to the court, and the court considers the agreement reached together with this D81 form to see if what has been agreed is fair and reasonable. And if this is the case, the court will approve the order, and then it becomes legally binding at this point. But this is a really, really important thing to think about. Yeah.
And another one, of course, which often comes up, we often hear about, of course, my partner has contact with my child and is refusing to return them. What can I do?
So the first thing to look at would be whether both parents have parental responsibility. And the mother automatically has parental responsibility, but the father would need to be named on the birth certificate or have an order in place granting him with parental responsibility. So if the parent is the father and they don't have parental responsibility and they've not returned the child, you could contact the police to return them, although the police don't tend to get involved unless there's like an immediate risk or harm to the child. So the best course of action would be to apply to the court for what's called a prohibited steps order to stop the parent from doing this again and to return the child, and also a child arrangements order to get a live with order, so it has ascertained where the child can live. And again, I'd strongly recommend you obtain legal advice if you're in this situation.
Right. Another one, of course, we often hear a lot of course, is my husband and I are thinking of divorce. Will we have to sell the family home?
So this isn't always the case, and I know this can be a lot of concern and worry for a lot of families going through the separation process, but there are other options other than just selling a house. And it really is dependent on the needs of both parties, and also if there's any young children, because their welfare will be paramount, and the courts, if involved, would want to make sure that the children have a roof over their head. So if the house was to be sold, there would need to be enough equity to be able to afford a property for both parents and both parties in the case. And you'd need to look at mortgage capacity to see if this could be done, to see if each person could have a deposit for a new house. If this was not the case, then other options would be for the property to be transferred to one of the parties involved, and this is usually in return for a lump sum payment. So again, it's very important to look at your mortgage borrowing capacity to see if you'd have enough capacity to take on the mortgage yourself, but also have enough money to take a further advance for this lump sum payment as well. And finally, another option could be that you leave the house as it is. So this is in a situation where there is a parent and they have young children and they can't afford to move out and sell the house and buy elsewhere. It could be that one of the parties can remain in the house, and one triggering event is required for the house to then be sold at a later stage. This could be when the youngest child turns 16 or finishes full-time secondary education. It could be if the person living in the property remarries or lives with another partner for more than 6 months. So there are various options other than just getting the property sold.
Right, okay, yeah. And finally on this one, of course, I've separated from my partner and we have agreed arrangement for our children, but not sticking to them. What can we do?
So the first thing that I would recommend is to speak to the other parent just to find out if this is a temporary thing, why they're not sticking to it. Does the arrangements need to be changed slightly if you're both in agreement to this? If that doesn't work, then there's always mediation. So you could appoint a professional mediator just to work with you to see if you can reach an arrangement, an agreement for the children. Failing that, you can instruct solicitors. So one party or both parties can instruct solicitors and they can write letters and, communicate and negotiate to see if an agreement can be reached that way. And then finally, as a last resort, we say it's a last resort because it's a time consuming, expensive and stressful process, but the other option is the court. So you could apply to the court for a child arrangements order to decide what happens with the children then. And then the court will make a decision based on the best interests of the children. And they usually, always, have guidance from CAFCAS who make recommendations on what they think is in the best interest for the children.
Right. All sounds very, very complicated, doesn't it? But you know what you're talking about. I certainly haven't got much clue in all of that, of course. But as I say, what complicated lives we lead sometimes, don't we? And these things unfortunately happen and, have to go through the channels, don't we?
Definitely. And, I'd like to think that people know that there are people, specialists out there that can help them in these difficult situations.
Well, thank you very much, Nicola, for popping in to see us here at 103 The Eye today. And I hope some of our listeners and those questions there have helped to sort people in the right direction, so to speak, yeah.
Thank you for having me. I've had a great time, and like you say, I hope it helps some of your listeners listening.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.